Welcome to the show, Ian Griffin. Ian Griffin is a New Zealand astronomer and currently the Director of Otago Museum here in Dunedin. Good evening, Ian.
Good evening, Pat. How are you doing?
Good, although your window behind us kind of gives us a bit away that this is a pre-record, because evening when we play this, afternoon when we speak. But thank you for giving us a few minutes. I'm sure today, the day before Matariki, what is it? Matariki Eve? Has that been said at all in your offices?
I'm sure it has. Everybody's taking Matariki very seriously here today, so it's Matariki all round.
We'll have a look at what the museum is doing tomorrow. So if people are in Dunedin, they can come along, or they can enjoy what you guys are doing. And obviously, if they're not, I suspect they'll be able to see it online anyway. But what I wanted to talk to you about in your capacity as an astronomer and a discoverer of minor planets, because for people who don't know, I've spoken to you on my podcast before, so we've had a big chat about that kind of exciting thing, is possibly more to do with the physical world and more to do with what Matariki is in the physical world, i.e. looking up into the sky and seeing the stars and what we're seeing. And I don't know, maybe what it signifies. I guess maybe that is not the physical world, but in general, looking at that aspect of it. So what can you tell us about what we are now referencing as Matariki?
Well, what I absolutely love about this new public holiday is it's based on actually observing the sky. Because in Maori culture, they had wise astronomers who basically figured out that when you saw Matariki rise before the sun, that was pretty much the middle of winter and the new year was going to begin. And it really does show that the Maori and their Polynesian ancestors were really talented scientists. They were people who went out and observed the world around them and used those observations to understand their local part of the cosmos. So from I guess you call it a Western astronomical perspective,
yep.
I would call this the helical rising of the Pleiades, or the star cluster which the Maori know as Matariki. And that means simply the earliest time you can see it when it emerges from the twilight in the morning. Now, the sun moves around the sky during the course of the year. You know, in winter, it's here in New Zealand anyway, it rises quite a long way north of east, and it never gets more than about 30 degrees high here in Dunedin, and then sets north of west.
Right. Yep.
And then in summer, you go out and it sets way south of, rises way south of east, gets really high in the sky, nearly 70 degrees high, and sets well to the south. And that's why we get nearly 17 hours of daytime here in the summer and only about 8 and a bit hours in the winter. So the sun appears to move around the sky, but it's not actually the sun that's moving, it's us. Our planet is orbiting the sun. And what that means is different bits of the sky get blasted out over the course of the year by sunlight.
Right.
So Matariki appears and it rises 4 minutes earlier every day. And slowly over the course of the next 6 months, it'll move through the sky, or seem to move through the sky. So it rises earlier. And then by summertime, Matariki will be disappearing into the evening sky. So I really think this is a fabulous thing. We're actually celebrating talented observers seeing this astronomical phenomenon and using it as a start date in their calendar. Now, also, Matariki itself is a fascinating object. It's very distinct. You can see it pretty much all over the world. In fact, Antarctica is about the only place in the world where you can't see it. And it's really distinct. It's what astronomers call an open cluster of stars. There's probably around 1,000 or so stars gravitationally bound to each other. And the human eye can't see 1,000 stars. We can see, and it depends how good your eyesight is and how dark the site you're looking at. But some people have been said to be able to see about 12 of these stars.
Wow.
In Greek culture, they were known as Matariki. They were known as the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters.
Yep.
And of course, cultures around the world have got names for this star cluster. The Japanese call it Subaru, and that's why the Subaru cars have basically an image of the Pleiades on their bonnet. So it is a very noticeable cluster of stars. It's very distinct, and even in the middle of a city, where the lights are there, you can see Matariki when it's reasonably high in the sky. So it's not surprising, really, that a culture that didn't necessarily know that you're looking at a gravitationally bound group of stars would notice that it's a very pretty group of stars and it's distinct, and would make up stories and legends around it. and attach it to their culture. So it's one of the things I really love about Matariki this year is absolutely it's a celebration of Maori culture, but it's also a celebration of the human spirit and our ability to observe the sky and make sense of the world that we live in.
One can only imagine as well, 200, 300, 500 years ago, what the night sky would have been without the light pollution we have and stuff today as well. So probably even more recognisable and easier to use as a locator back when there weren't cities shedding a ton of light up into the atmosphere as well.
That's absolutely right. In fact, I mean, we're very lucky in New Zealand. I mean, probably only maybe Auckland and Christchurch and Wellington are really, really badly polluted. Even from the centre of Dunedin, you can see a decent night sky and see the Milky Way. But I was out the other morning. I mean, I've been going out every morning to look at Matariki. And you can see it. Last Sunday, it was just about visible just before, well, not before sunrise, but as the sky got bright, you could just about see it. And by tomorrow morning, it's going to be dead easy. One of the things that's interesting this year, though, is if you do go out and try and see it in the morning sky, you'll notice that there's this kind of red-purple haze before dawn, and that's nothing to do with Matariki. It's caused by the Tongan volcano that exploded back in January. It threw a whole bunch of stuff up into the atmosphere, and there's still aerosols hanging around, and they're giving us these remarkable sunrises and sunsets at the moment. They're truly beautiful. But unfortunately, that haze has made Matariki a little bit difficult to see, but it is actually easy to see now. And actually, there's a really convenient, almost like a celestial signpost to it at the moment, because the planet Venus is very close to it in the sky. So if you go out and you find a view tomorrow morning to the, if you find a place with a good view to the northeast, you'll see a stonkingly bright object, really quite low, and that's the planet Venus. And then below and to the left of it, you should see the stars of Matariki hanging there. So it's a really great time. We've had a brilliant run of put my teeth in, a brilliant run of weather this week. Frosty mornings mean it's very cold and icy, but it gives you a lovely clear sky. So I would encourage all of your viewers and your listeners to get out there tomorrow morning and enjoy this brilliant sight, because it's wonderful.
Both you and I are in Dunedin. You're talking about looking to the northeast sky. I'm assuming, part of my ignorance, but because of the vastness of the solar system and the smallness of New Zealand, that wherever you are in the country, it'll still be in the northeast?
Yeah, that's right. Although, because, I mean, it's interesting. I was doing doing a thing for my daughter's class up in Auckland the other day. And I realized actually, even though New Zealand's a relatively small country, there are considerable changes in the time of sunrise and sunset across the country. So Auckland gets, this time of year, they get about an hour more daylight than we do. But of course, in summer, we get much more daylight than they do. And that's simply because of the latitude, the distance between us and the equator. So having said that, though, Matariki does appear in the northeast wherever you are in the country. It just rises at a slightly different time. Down here in Dunedin, it's about 6:30 in the morning. I think up in Auckland, it's a little bit like 5:30, almost 6 o'clock. So they get to see it a little bit earlier, but they lose it as the sun rises.
I got another question, actually a question based on what you're saying. The name of Pleiades, Matariki, Seven Sisters is first time it's ever occurred to me, Ian. Is Matariki unique in that different cultures have different names for it? Or do pretty much all the star clusters have different names for different cultures? I don't remember this conversation so much. Maybe it's because we're talking about Matariki that it becomes more obvious, but I don't remember this conversation ever really happening before about, in this culture that star's called this and we call it that and they call it that. Is it unique in that, or is this common?
Well, it's fairly common. I mean, I think the key thing about Matariki is it's quite easy to see. Nearly all of the stars in the sky have got different names according to different cultures. And the planets too. So I think we've got Kopu, which is Venus, and that's understandable. But I think there are relatively few objects that have got so many names across cultures.
Right.
And I think that's really entirely due to the prominence of Matariki in the sky. It's really quite an obvious thing to look at it. And that's why I think it does have these different names. And of course, it's in a part of the sky that you can see, say, all the way from the North Pole right the way down to almost Antarctica. You can see this cluster of stars.
Wow.
So again, it's got worldwide. You can see it pretty much from the whole planet.
So like everyone could use it as a locating position because everyone can see it. Is what you're saying? Yeah,
that's right.
So it'd be common amongst. So the Southern Cross may not have the same prominence in the Northern Hemisphere to their local Indigenous people around the country because it's a Southern Cross, whereas this is sort of seen by everybody.
Well, that's right. I mean, there are parts of the sky that in the north that we can't see from here. So, for example, I grew up in London, and the Big Dipper, the Great Bear, is one of the most famous
Yeah.
constellations in the sky, and that never rises in New Zealand. And here as you've already said, here in New Zealand, we get to see the Southern Cross, and you can't see that from the UK and Northern Europe.
Yeah.
So there are parts of the sky that different parts of the planet can't see, but because the Pleiades are relatively close to what they call the celestial equator, it can be seen pretty much from the whole planet, and that's why it's such a useful tool for cultures around the world.
I love the idea about sort of natural knowledge. You're talking about how Māori were using it and identifying it as the middle of winter. I sometimes think when I walk out my front door and it's still fairly frosty and I see blossoms coming out on trees, and I kind of go, oh, what's that tree telling us? You know, what is this signifying to us? And I think from what I understand, it's generally signifying that the days have just started to get a little bit longer. We've gone through because the buds need a certain amount of light to then start to produce. And even if it's really cold, you see buds coming out on the trees, it tells you something, because we often think, well, that's a springtime thing, but actually my understanding is it's more of a length of light in the sky type thing. So yeah, I like that. Hey, listen, we should also probably just very quickly say, to let people know, let me bring it up on the screen here, what's happening at the museum tomorrow. If people are in Dunedin, or as I said, if they're outside of Dunedin and they want to have a look online, you've got a dawn ceremony going on. Is that the major event for Matariki tomorrow?
Yeah, that's the kickoff really for the entire city celebration, or a commemoration of Matariki. So we're up pretty early tomorrow morning. About 7 o'clock things kick off. And it's going to be really beautiful. We've got some amazing projections that are going to go on the front of the museum.
Yep.
And we've invited folks, because part of the cultural tikanga of Matariki is that it's about remembering those who've passed during the last year. So we've actually put out an invitation, and I think we've got nearly 200 images of folks who passed in the last year are going to be projected along with celestial imagery onto the front of the museum from about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, lovely.
And then we're obviously going to have a karakia and go in for some cultural performances inside the museum. And that's all followed by some amazing kai. We've got a great big free breakfast tomorrow morning. Because that's also part of Matariki, the fact that you remember those who've passed, you look forward to the new year, and then you all celebrate with a damn fine feed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the museum's bacon butties are up there with the best of them. So I'm quite looking forward to that after a very, very early start tomorrow.
I think, as we all know, having food in a celebration is an essential. It's a part of how we celebrate. People are in Dunedin, they know where the museum is, but people who don't, right by the main entrance to the university, in between the two one-ways, if you're looking to locate it. What is the official address? Because it is on both one-ways, yeah? Is there an official address?
Yeah, it's 419 Great King Street is our address.
There you go.
So if you plug that into
Great
Google
King.
Maps, you should be able to find us. But just look for a building that's full of beautiful pictures and a crowd of people outside. That will be us tomorrow morning.
And then you'll be putting that up, like that event up online afterwards. We'll be able to, people who can't get there can get along to the website, which is, of course, otagomuseum.nz, and have a look at what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And as I say, if you do get a chance to come along tomorrow morning, it's going to be a very, very special day. We've got some brilliant cultural performances, activities across the day. And it was, we did it last year as almost like a dress rehearsal, and it was a fabulous, fabulous day. Well worth getting up. And the drive in from Portobello for me means to get up about 5 o'clock. But on the way, it does mean I get to see Matariki. So I'll be stopping off and, tipping my hat to the cluster as it rises above the harbour tomorrow morning.
Amazing. Director of Otago Museum here in Dunedin, that is Ian Griffin. Ian, thank you for joining us. Really genuinely appreciate your insights.
Great speaking to you, Pat.